Hello, this is Nikki in Niagara coming to you from Niagara Falls, Canada, and I am going to be sharing the books I have read in the month of November. Good start with the words. In November. So I will be coloring while I do that. I think I decided last month that I was going to color by numbers because it's easier to talk and color that way. So we're going to be coloring out of Christmas Ceramic Tiles, Color by Number by Prachi Dewan Sachdeva. And this is simply the first page in the book. And we'll be starting with pink. So the first book I read this month was the Day by Day Armageddon Book 2, Beyond Exile, but I did a wrap-up for that at the end of last month since I'd already finished it and I had done Book 1 that month, so it means we're moving on to book number 2, which was Black Canyon by Jeremy Bates. Now, I decided to read all of his short novellas, I guess we'll call them, that belonged to this one certain series, which were all thrillers, and some of them are a little bit horror thrillers, because I found them so good. They were like just kind of like heart-pounding tales. They were short, so they got to the action right away, and they left you like feeling they had great endings that you kind of expect from that kind of a tale. So the first one I read was called Black Canyon, and in this one, a little boy who is 10 goes on a camping trip with his parents, and it's set in the 70s. He goes on a camping trip with his parents. Now his parents argue all the way there, and this boy is used to this kind of behavior from his parents, and they pretty much are just not the greatest parents. They like drink while they're driving on the road, and they're smoking pot and all this sort of stuff. And so they finally get to their campsite, and the father, who is a bit of a jerk, or a lot of a jerk, he takes them through this path where it says do not enter, path closed, and of course they have to go that way because the father says, oh, that doesn't mean us. And so they go out there, and the father says they have a good time actually, and then the father says, well, let's go down to the river. And there's a sign there's a chain actually across the path where the entrance to the river is. And the father behaves as though that doesn't belong to us. It doesn't mean us. And they go through that. Needless to say, they end up getting lost, and something terrible happens. And this is our story of what happens next. Let's see what I wrote down. It says, a young boy I told you everything I wrote down here. I just ended with the trip turns to horror. So, yeah, and it was really good. The twist in it was like, oh, it was just like, it would have been a perfect beginning to a novel, and then you could have had the book set in the future, and yeah, this would have been good for background story. Okay, I'm just checking to see if there's any more 17s. And I'm not seeing any. Okay. So then the next book I wrote I wrote, yeah, I wish. The next book I wrote, read, was another one by Jeremy Bates, and this one was called Run. So this one involves a camping trip as well, and this one does actually start with a flashback to the past where Charlotte and her boyfriend and two of her friends, another couple, her best friend and her boyfriend, they go camping, and all of a sudden, they'd never met this boyfriend before, but all of a sudden something kind of like makes him go off, and he gets really, really like screaming mad and stuff and violent, and then he takes off to go, well, he just takes off from them. And after a little while, the other boy says, well, I'll go see what he's up to and, see if he's calmed down. So he goes, and they're gone for a while. So the girls get up, and they go along, and they arrive just in time to see her boyfriend, our main character's boyfriend, I've forgotten his name, kill the other boy, and she lets out a scream, so does the other one. The boyfriend throws the girl's friend in the air, basically, and then sets off chasing after her. And so this was the past, and now it's the future. It's been several years. Oh no, I don't even think it's been several years. It's only been a year or so. And she has decided to move, get a new job, kind of start life afresh in a new place, new people, that whole thing. And it's starting to go really well for her when all of a sudden he shows up. And then that's where the story takes us from there. And this has a wicked, wicked ending. I just absolutely loved the ending to this. Really good. So these are short, fast, get to the point thrillers that just basically have you turning the pages or pushing the pushing the page as fast as you possibly can until you get to the end and you go, whoa, wicked. So that's how I describe these books. So that one was Run. Then the next book that I read was Finch by Jeff Vandermeer. And this is a difficult book to describe. I'm just having a sip of my pop. I have dry mouth condition, so I have to take a drink quite often so that my mouth doesn't dry up so much that I can't talk. So Finch is the third and final book in the Ambergris trilogy. It's a great big book. It's 660 pages, I think it was. And it basically would make no sense to anybody who hadn't read the first two books, especially book number 2. Because the book number 2 and number 3 are the most tied together, even though they're not. You'll know what I mean if you read it. So I'm going to read what I wrote, and then we'll see if I have anything else to say. So I said the book was brilliant, and I believe it was. It was the best book in the whole series altogether, and I gave it a 5 out of 5, which I don't do that often. All right, what color is 12? 12 is light blue, so I need 67 and 66. So it took a while to get used to the narrator because he often used incomplete sentences, left off the subject, and basically skipped articles altogether. So writing was a little difficult to get used to. I called it a fantastic crime noir that blends the trilogy together and really features the city again as a character. And it made me want to read the first book all over again. The first book kind of leaves you... the first book is a series of short stories, interconnected ones, but it's really mind-boggling when you're new to Jeff Vandermeer, and so now I know a lot of things that I didn't know reading it, and I think that it'd be enjoyable to read it again just to see how it tied in, which could be just the kind of thing that he counted on us doing. So yeah, I don't have anything else to say. It's just too bizarre and wild to really tell you what the plot's about. So the next book I read was Kristen Maudglin. I believe this was her newest book at this time, called Our Little Secrets, and this is another novella. See, I forgot to tell you how many books I read. I read 27 books this month, but mostly it was, 26. Mostly it was that much because of the novellas that I read. Otherwise, I probably read maybe 18 or 19 books. Okay, so let's see. Our Little Secrets. 3 sets of people, all with something to hide. When one woman swears she saw a car drive into the lake. These 3 neighborhood friends each don't... What have I said? Oh yeah, 3 sets of people. Okay, so I'm talking about 3 sets of people. They each don't want divers to come along and search the lake. So the one lady is trying to get them not to do that. One man is wishing to high heaven and doing everything he can do to not let that happen. The other couple ends up having a secret about something else, which comes up later on. But each couple has a different thing to hide, though it's not always a joint thing between them. So the secrets, twists, and turns abound and kept me guessing till the end. Yeah, this one just kept twisting you around, and that end has worn out. And you just don't know what is going on until the very end, and it was a great ending. This was another really, really good book by Kristen. I really enjoy her novellas. At this point, there's only been one that was less than excellent. So again, I gave that a 5 out of 5. Next book I read was another Jeremy Bates one, and this one is called Reroll. It's right end. This one was called Reroll. I gave this one 4 out of 5. Set in the future, Kim has saved a year's salary to buy himself a mech, a human-like AI. Once it arrives, he has a roll party where he's given 3 rolls to give his mech a personality and traits. So this is something that comes with the mech when you buy it. And a mech started off as being basically a sex doll that had some humanity to it. Eventually, at this point, when our story's taken place, they have become full-fledged human replicas of artificial intelligence. So they're basically human-like robots with, they have special, their skin gets warm, you can feel them breathing. At first glance and second glance, there's no difference in telling them apart. So they're pretty much all women, the mechs, because, sex industry's always been a man's industry. So he has very, very, very specific traits that he wants his mech to have. And so he has this big party, and you get 3 free rolls to roll your mech's personality. They don't come with one. They'll just sit there doing nothing unless they have a personality. So you do this whenever you get one, and he rolls his first 3 rolls, and he's not happy. So the problem is that to get a re-roll, you basically have to spend as much as you did on the mech as you do on the re-rolls. So he spent a year's worth of his salary on this first one, and now he's spending the last of his savings to get a re-roll. So let's just say that the re-roll doesn't go how he had expected it to go. And yeah, that causes a lot of problems, and that's where our story goes. So this one had a really wicked ending too. I didn't see it coming. Totally cool. So even though that this one is technically science fiction, you can tell it's not that much of sci-fi, so you don't have to like sci-fi to enjoy the story. Now the next one is 6 Bullets, which again is by Jeremy Bates. Now this one takes place just after the apocalypse. And what started it again? Was it an asteroid? Yeah, it was an asteroid hit the Earth, and basically everybody was given a week's notice that the asteroid was coming, and at this point there was nothing that could be done. So it was a, be prepared to meet your maker type of deal for the residents of Earth. However, our main character is a prepper, and he's always been prepared for this exact kind of situation. And so he's got 2 sons, which he happens to have with him when the asteroid hits. And so then the book is about how they survive and live, and the things that happens, like roving bands of gangs, motorcycle gangs, people stealing, that kind of stuff. So it's how they get through that. But earlier on, at one point, he tells us that there's one important rule to survival, and unfortunately, at some point, he ends up breaking this important rule, and of course, things do not go well. And yeah, so this one was really good. I like apocalyptic stories, and this one definitely, whoops, I don't want that in. This one definitely was good. And I gave that one 5 out of 5. You can tell how much I liked these. I don't give out 5s very often. Oh, the next story, another one by him called The Mailman, and this one is really wicked. It has a very simple premise. We have a woman who goes to, things aren't working out with her and her husband very well. They're going through a tough time. And they've been married for a long time, 18 years, and they've recently moved to a new town, and so she doesn't have any friends, and after a period of time she's depressed and she's lonely, and she ends up succumbing to sleeping with the mailman. And right away she knows she had done the wrong thing. And she had thought she was doing the wrong thing all along, but she just gave in to the passion. And, I don't ever believe, personally, I don't ever believe that is an excuse. and but she immediately regrets it. And it ends up being that this one, some would call it little mistake, but this one mistake becomes the nightmare of her entire life. And that's all I'm going to say. So, the next one was, I believe, nope, still got another one. Okay, so it was another Jeremy Bates novella, Rewind. And this one got an A. Oh, not an A, a 5. My book that I'm writing this down in is has a rating system of A through F, but I just consider them my usual 1 through 5. So, anyways, so this man suddenly wakes up, and this is the beginning of our story. This man wakes up. He doesn't know where he is. He's in a grungy apartment room that has the bed that he's sleeping on, and I don't know, there's some other piece of furniture in there, and he doesn't know why he's there. And he starts to think about it, and he doesn't know. He knows his name, but he can't remember, like, who he is. And so what's happened is that he wakes up with amnesia. So he eventually gets up out of bed and walks into the next room and finds him a very large, bald, dead man laying on the floor. And so the rest of the story is what he does in this situation and his quest to find out who he is. And this one had a shocker of an ending and was pretty violent. I should have mentioned this already, but these stories are all pretty violent. So yeah, this one was, yeah, definitely. And the ending was a huge surprise. And usually I am really good at guessing the ending of, I'm good at guessing whodunit. Not always good at guessing the why, but the whodunit is not that hard for me to figure out. And I didn't figure it out in this, and I didn't figure out what was going on in most of these stories. Probably one of the reasons why I enjoyed it so much. So then the next one is called Rewind, and it's another novella by Jeremy Bates. And, oh no, that's the one we just did. That was the amnesia one. Okay, so here we go. This is the last. What happened? Oh, I must have put the book away, huh? I have the book of the next one that we're doing. Okay, so first of all, let's do this. This is the last Jeremy Bates one. It's called Box of Bones, and I gave it 4. So a man wakes up. He's disoriented. He's in the dark, and he doesn't really know what's going on. So he kind of, like, feels around for his phone, and it's not there, and he starts feeling. He's assumed he was on a bed, but he starts feeling, and no, he's not on a bed. This is wood. He's laying on wood. And eventually he realizes that he's inside of a coffin. A wood coffin. And so he's been buried alive. And now this is one of my scares. As if I see a movie that has buried alive in it, it just like freaks me out. And not quite so bad when I read it, but it is one of the few things that does actually freak me out. So he's buried alive, and we follow his thoughts and his hysteria and as he goes along, and then it has a major twist ending, which was fantastic. Loved this one. Really made me chuckle at the end. With the there's nothing to chuckle about, let me tell you. But yeah, the twist was so good it made me chuckle. If that makes sense to you. So the next book I actually own, but I must have accidentally put it away, so I don't have it here to show you. And this is another Junji Ito book. I'm just taking another sip. Okay, so just let me get my next colors. I'm going to do 14, which is lavender, so I want 75 and 76. There's 75 and there's 76. Alright, so this is a manga, and as is usual with most of Ito's books, it is a collection of short stories. Unlike most of his collections of short stories, these are interconnected. They all feature the same brother and sister characters. We have Yuma, who is a teenager, and he goes around apologizing profusely to people, apologizing for what his sister has done, and this is his way of pleasing the devil. Now, what has his sister done? Well, she's an elementary age girl, and she goes around, well, basically she's some kind of demon because she doesn't look human. She's got like this big scary face, and she goes around and attacks people for the two reasons. No, not two reasons. One reason, first of all, that she attacks these people is so that I'm getting mixed up. So that Yuma, why don't I just read what I wrote? She attacks people for Yuma to apologize to. Then she can lick up the melted brain remains, which she calls people juice, which is her favorite thing. And so each one of these stories is an encounter of this horrible brother and sister with some poor, unsuspecting people. And of course, the art is just absolutely fantastic. I guess I should get coloring. The art is absolutely fantastic. I wish I had the book here to show you. But just like his other books, it's really good. I gave this one a 4. I very rarely give short story books a 5. Has to be really, really deserving of it to get a 5. So it got a 4, which is pretty good in my books. So the next book is a true crime book, and I really enjoyed this. I gave it a 5. It's called Above Suspicion, and it's about, did I write his name down? So I can never remember people's names, so I didn't write it down, what his name is. But anyways, he's one of the only FBI agents to confess to murder. And this story takes place, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, the 80s or 90s, but, you know, considering that isn't that long ago. So his first assignment is to a very, very, very small town in the... Now, I don't know how to say this because I would say Appalachian Mountains, but I heard somewhere that people from there don't like that and that they call it Appalachia. So I'm going to call it Appalachia. But then I might be saying it wrong and then I would annoy people. Okay, so how about this way? I know that it's called Appalachia or something like that, but I'm going to say Appalachian as that is what most people who don't live there call it. So he's assigned to this place in the Appalachians. And he is a Yankee, And here he is going to a very conservative, small town, Appalachian, southern town. So they call him Yankee. People in the South seem to call the Northerners Yankees, but the people in the North don't call the people in the South any special name. As far as I know, anyways. So he starts out alienating the people, but he eventually becomes quite an important man in town. And oh, I'm doing this wrong. Okay, so I'll just have to do the 13s. Coloring the wrong number. I guess it isn't going to matter too much on a pattern, is it? It's really hard to talk and color at the same time, guys. If you haven't done it, it is hard. So it was really, really good. I just loved this guy, and even though he ends up making a mistake, well, I mean, can one call murder a mistake? No. But but then again, I mean, he commits murder, and I felt sorry for him. I was like, oh no, why did he go and do that? You know, it was like he was actually one of the FBI's most intelligent officers, and he had done a lot for crime in that part of the country while he was there. And he was there for quite a number of years. They kept putting off his whatever they call moving, you know, being sent to another town. They kept putting that off, you know, telling him different reasons, but the reason they were really doing it was because he was so good down there that they just didn't want to lose him working there. They didn't want him to just become a cog in a city branch. So anyways, this drives his wife up the wall. She, like, at first and this is another feeling that I got from the book, is that she starts off being all, you know, doesn't matter where we go, we'll go anywhere, I'll be behind you, I'll stick with you, I'll stick by you, things will only get better from here. And yeah, she does. She is like that. She holds out for a really long time, but then things just get to be too much, you know, after all the years. And she will do anything that she can to get him to be called out of there so that they can go live somewhere nice. But I have to tell you, I was just feeling like this wife does this stuff, and I'm thinking, I don't like her. You know, I liked her at first when she was supporting him, but when she wasn't supporting him, I didn't like her because I liked him so much, and he had to go and commit murder, and it just frustrated me so much, and I found myself at times wanting him to have gotten away with it. Fighting with myself there, but it was that good that it made me have those feelings. So, it ends up having a really bittersweet ending. I won't go into any more in depth with it. I don't usually like books about, or biographies and memoirs anyways, about police. I usually find it pretty boring. The FBI a little bit more exciting than if it was just a cop, but still not that exciting unless it's someone famous like John Douglas or somebody who worked with profiling. So for me to like this so much is a good indicator of how good this book is. So yeah, if you like true crime, I highly recommend this one. I gave it a 5. This was the month of 5s. Okay, now the next book is My Heart is a Chainsaw. Was that the next one? Yeah, My Heart is a Chainsaw, and I own this one. right here. My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. This is actually my first Stephen Graham Jones book. And it turns out that this is a controversial book in the book community because it seems like people either love it or they hate it. And I didn't love it, but I liked it a lot. It starts with this girl who is she's an outcast. She's a goth and she lives in a small conservative town. It seems to be a theme here. But of course she's being a goth just so she can rebel. But she has an overactive imagination. And because she is a walking encyclopedia of slasher films, she lets her mind get carried away in that direction. So she imagines that she lives in a town where a slasher movie is going to happen. Like, not the movie, but the real events is going to be like, and she doesn't like, well, I won't say that because it's for you to decide on your own. But, so she decides that this is what's going to happen in this town. So that's where her imagination takes her. And so she's always been waiting around to see who is going to be the final girl. Because the girl who lives at the end of a slasher movie is called the final girl. And so she knows the movie isn't gonna, or she knows that these serial killings aren't going to happen in her town until she knows who the first girl is going to be. Because she feels that it's her job, because she knows so much, to help the final girl out and tell her what to do and how to make it out alive. Because final girls are the only ones who do anything that's not absolutely stupid, which most of the other girls do in these kinds of movies. So one day there's a new girl at school, and she's it. She's the one. She is going to be the final girl. And again, I haven't written down the name, so I don't know her name. Did I write it anywhere? No, I just keep calling her she. I'm going to try and write down names this month. So she tries to befriend her so that all of this stuff will come about. And of course, she has a hard time getting this to happen, but things do start to happen. So now I'm going to read what I wrote down. So she's sure the new girl at school must be the final girl. And so she has this slasher taking place in her town, and the lines between reality and fantasy blur. The book is marketed as a horror, but I'd hardly call it one. It's not a horror at all. By any means is it a horror. There's nothing gross in it, and it just gets kind of horror-ish at the end when well, I won't tell you when what, but at the end it gets, the final scenes could be called horror-ish, let's just say that. So I really liked it, and I came up with some sage words about what I thought it all meant. Not giving away anything here. It's just, I enjoyed this tale mostly of a lonely girl's need for stories to make her life exciting. That's what I thought she was doing. I didn't think she thought this was real. I didn't think that she was mental and thought that there really was a slasher going on in her town. And I didn't think that there was this going on, or that it was her imagination. Well, I mean, it was her imagination, but I think that she knew in reality that it wasn't real. It's just that the lines were getting blurred for her. That's what I think, anyways. That's besides the point. The reason as to why she does this has nothing to do with the story. But that's what I think, anyways. So the book is a slow burn. If you're reading this because you think it's a horror, you're reading it for the wrong reasons, because it isn't a horror. Read the back of the book. The back of the book tells you what this book is, and it's truthful. If you've just heard things about this book, then you need to step away from that. Read the back of the book. Realize it's not a horror. Read what it really is about, or listen to me, what I've just said the book is about, and make the decision yourself. The characters in it are awesome. I loved everybody, and whether they were good or bad, I just enjoyed the character, let's say it that way. Really did. Enjoyed them all. And I'd recommend it, but not to horror fans per se. I mean, if you think that slasher films are fun, you can read it, because this book thinks that slasher films are fun too. This is my very first Stephen Graham Jones book, and I think I said that already, but it's my understanding that his books combine humor and horror, if I'm not mistaken. Because if that's the truth, then that's generally what this is, because it's funny that it knows all this stuff about slasher films, and it's fun. I didn't know them all, because I only know about the 70s and 80s slasher movies, so it was fun for me knowing that information. I can imagine just how much more fun it was for people who got even the more recent hints. The stuff that had to do with that, getting the references there. That's the word I was trying to find. So yeah, don't let people's reviews of this that are negative, don't let that make you decide whether you read the book or not. Read what the book is about. Read the synopsis on Amazon. Don't go down below to the reviews. Read the synopsis, and it tells you. It does not tell you that this is a horror movie, because a lot of horror book, because a lot of people don't like the book because it's not horror, and they thought it was horror going into it. Anybody who thought this book was horror before getting into it didn't read the synopsis, because the synopsis doesn't try to trick you. It doesn't tell you it's horror. It really does tell you what the book is about. So there, that's my review of My Heart is a Chainsaw. So the next book I read is one that I own. This is called The Uncanny Reader. I actually started this some years ago, and I found it on my shelf as being halfway read. So when I finished my great big huge H.G. Wells book, I picked this one up, but I was already halfway through it, so it's not as big a book as it looks for me to read since my last book, because as you probably know by now, I read a short story every morning with my coffee. So this it's called The Uncanny Reader, Stories from the Shadows. So this is a collection of strange tales, dark stories, strange, weird, maybe not quite so weird. There's an H.P. Lovecraft in here, so there is definitely one weird one. So the first half of the book is by authors from the 1800s to the early 1900s, and the second half of the book is from, say 1950s to the present day. And let me get back to coloring. Okay, So now I wanted whatever color 13 was supposed to be, purple. So let's get 85 and 81. Yeah, so the second half is, where was I? Is newer authors. And I guess that's all I really have to say about it. The books that I read this time around, like, I don't remember the first half of the book. The second half of the book was really good. I pretty much enjoyed every single story from the middle going on. And since the authors are the olden, the vintage authors in the first part of the book, I probably enjoyed that just as much, because those are the kind of stories I read a lot of. So yeah, I'm going to recommend this one for if you want some strange dark tales. You're going to get quite a good variety in here, from some oldie stuff to more modern writers like Jonathan Carroll is on the front. Let's see where I can put these. About there. Okay, so the next book is another one that I own, and this is The Devil You Know. Now, I don't remember the story too much. I gave this a 4-star, and I gave the other book 4 stars as well, the Uncanny Reader, or whatever it was called. Yeah, the Uncanny Reader was 4 as well. So this book really gripped me because it takes place in my area. It doesn't take place in my town, but it takes place in the Niagara region, and then it takes place in Toronto. So I had heard of all the places that were mentioned in here, and I'd even been to some of them. So it's not too often that happens. I've read a couple of books that took place in Niagara Falls, but only a couple. So it was that was a lot of fun, and it helped grip me to the story. Now, the other thing that had me gripped from the get-go was that this book takes place in 1993, and it's set amidst the Paul Bernardo murders. And 1993 was the year that he was caught, and I believe he went to trial. No, usually it takes, well, it was the beginning of his trial anyways. So there was quite a bit of talk about that. That had absolutely nothing to do with the story, but that was the backdrop. And our main character is a rookie journalist, and the first assignment that she's given, well, not the first assignment, she's been there a while, but her first assignment of doing anything that had to do with crime reporting was that she had to go park outside the Bernardo home and watch as the forensic people were working in the house. Now, they worked there for quite some time, and it was basically a boring job, because the only things they did that she could see was carry bags in and out of the house. So definitely something that's given to a rookie, and she's supposed to tell them anything at all that happens out of the ordinary, so that she's there just in case something does happen. So that's all the story has to do with that, but that had me right there. So then, as she's sitting there, I'm going to read what I wrote down. She starts thinking of her friend Leanne, who disappeared when they were 12. Neither she nor her kidnapper were ever found. Evie becomes determined to solve this cold case. and becomes embroiled in dangerous situations. So she goes down when she has a weekend off or something like that, and then she calls in a story to her boss, let's say, because I don't know what he's called, to her boss, and he says, okay, write that and then get up here quick because you got stuff to do. Well, of course, now that she's starting to figure things out, she doesn't want to go back, and so she stays there, and she doesn't call her boss until she's got something important to tell him, and he doesn't. He's always wanting her to come back home, but he's taking her stories as she gets them. And then at one point, he sends, he's like, all right, you can stay down there, but I'm sending a seasoned reporter down for you to work with. So technically this is more of a mystery than it is a thriller, but the ending of it is very intense. So, yes, thriller readers should like it. I'm pretty much a dyed-in-the-wool thriller reader. Not too many just mysteries that I read anymore, though I used to. And I liked it. So, I gave it a 4. And that was probably because of the backdrop. If it wasn't for that, to be honest, I'd probably have given it a 3. But it's definitely worth the read. And if you're Canadian, it's a Canadian author, Canadian story. Yeah. Definitely recommended. So now, the next book I read was on the Kindle, and it was called Pigs. Now, when this book started, I almost DNF'd it right away because it was just weird. Like, really weird. And I thought, what the heck is this? And, of course, I thought, well, it sounds so interesting that I kept reading it, and it wasn't long. And, well, I mean, it took a little while, I won't lie. It took a little while, but not that long, because the book isn't that long to start with, until I was really into it. And I'm not very good at, talking intelligently, shall we say, off the cuff. So I'm going to read what I wrote down for this one, because this one is a bit of a thinker. A dystopian novel whose main theme is the world's pollution. It takes place on a small island with only a few inhabitants who are divided into the oppressed and the oppressors. The oppressed are children, and the oppressors are adults. Now, upon the shores of this island comes all the litter, debris, detritus of the world. And it is the children's job to pick this up and take it to the 6 pigs that they have in a fenced-in area. Take it to them, and then the pigs will eat it. So the pigs eat the garbage of the world. And that's how we get our title, Pigs. So there are 3 children. And when I read what this book was about, it said that something about a boy comes to shore and the children have to decide whether he's garbage or something worth saving. And that doesn't ever happen in the book. A boy does come to shore, but they never seriously consider whether he is garbage or if he should be thrown back. Now, an adult comes ashore, and that happens with him. So I don't know why the synopsis says it differently, but I just thought I should say that because I was waiting for it to happen and it didn't, and so that's just not right. So So I guess, as I was saying, that it took me a little while to get involved into the book, and that's because it takes its slow time to get around to explaining. You're just dropped in there, and the children are picking stuff up off of the shore, and they're feeding these pigs, and they're having these conversations that are like right in the middle of something, and you don't know where you are, what's going on, what they're talking about. But eventually, over time, it starts to fill you in so that you like actually know what's going on. So I really ended up enjoying it, and there are some violent parts in the book, like really violent, and they're quite shocking because most of the book is not violent or brutal, but when the violence does happen, it's very brutal, and it shocked me, really. It shocked me that it was there, and just how brutal it was for the story I was being told. So there's that. And when I finished the book, I was like, I don't know. I was like thinking it was a 3 and stuff. And then I have just found that since then, the book has been staying on my mind, and I remember parts of it. I read so much. Some people could say that that's why I don't remember a lot of my books, but I mean, I have short term memory, so I have problems with remembering details of things. That's why I have a hard time remembering my books. It was one of the reasons why I started being a book blogger in the first place, way back in 20 something. Yeah, so when a book lingers in my mind, it's something pretty special piece of literature to me, even though I only gave this a 4 and not a 5. And that's because of the craziness that you just dropped into in the beginning. And I know, I mean, that's common in books, but I don't like it. I like them to, like, let me know where I am, what's going on, and then, get on with further developments. Don't drop me right in the middle of further developments and expect me to just read until I figure out who's who. But I ended up enjoying it a lot. So that one I do recommend. If you're into dystopian novels and not just like young adult dystopia, like if you like really thinking stuff, that is for you. So then the next book that I read was one of the books that I got for the Abominable Book Club. Oh, I should say that what the heck is it called? Oh yeah, My Heart is a Chainsaw was a book from the Abominable Book Club too. So the next one I read from them was Mr. X by Peter Straub. This was my gently used book, and I was looking forward to reading this because I'd been thinking about Straub lately and thinking about maybe possibly reading Ghost Story again. I read it for the first time when I was in like grade 6 or 7 or something. Whenever the movie came out, I read the book before that because I was excited that they were making a movie. Oh, no, it's the wrong way around. I did go see the movie, and my dad told me it was a book, and then I went and read the book. So yeah, I was thinking about him, either reading that or getting into reading some more of his stuff, because a couple months back, I read, probably in September, because that was the first month I started doing this, I read Pork Pie Hat by Peter Straub. So, yeah, I read this. Now, ever since Ned was old enough to sit up by himself, he's been looking behind his shoulder, as if he's looking for his shadow. So he's our main character, and this is a tale of two feuding families, the Dunstans and the Hatches. Ned is a Dunstan. The Dunstans each have a special power, and when Ned returns to his birth town, he is drawn into the strangeness of his family. He hadn't known this, that about his family. This was all new to him. And he finds it out from an unlikely source. Well, a likely source that he never knew about. But once he's there, he decides that he's going to find. Well, I don't know if he decides. But anyways, he is looking for his shadow, because by this time he knows it's real. This entity is somehow his shadow, and somehow real, a real being. And that's what the book is about. No, I can't really say anything else about it. And this is a chunkster. This is an old book with tiny print, but not as tiny as they used to be in books, and as books were in the 70s and 80s. I don't even know how I read those with the book print so tiny. Well, I had good eyes back then, so that's probably how. But yeah, this was really good. It was not a fast read. It's not for books. It's not for people who like books to have something happening all the time. So I'm not a plot reader. I'm a character reader, and I really enjoy books with large casts of characters, and that's what this has. Not as large as, like, say, Stephen King books, but still it's got a pretty decent sized cast, and that's what I like. And I like when books flop back and forth between points of view, and as far as I remember, that's what this does. Though I don't think it tells you. Yes, it does. It flips backwards and forwards between points of view, and I like that as well. So for people who like character-driven books, who don't have to have something happening all the time, because it is slow if you look at it that way. I never for once felt like the book was slow, because I was thoroughly enjoying it all the way through, all the events that were happening, but also just the daily whatever the people were doing. Like if our main character went to visit Aunt Nellie, I think her name was, then, and what they talked about that was interesting to me. I hope I'm not making the book sound boring now, but you know, that's just the kind of book it is. It's good. If you like Peter Straub, you'll like this, I think. Probably not one of his best books, but I gave it 4 stars because I thoroughly enjoyed myself reading it. And I think, to me, that's the main point of reading, is to enjoy the books that you're reading, whatever kind they are. So the next book I read is, again, one that I own. And this is The Women of Weird Tales. So this is my first fiction book from the Monster She Wrote series. I read Monster She Wrote, and immediately after that I went and ordered one of the Monster She Wrote fiction books. And this one is The Women of Weird Tales. And it's a collection of stories by women writers whose stories appeared in the Weird Tales magazine. So these were all in the early years of that magazine, which, does it say when the magazine came out? Yeah, 1923. So these stories are all kind of around the 20s and the 30s, though the main problem with this book is that it doesn't tell you when the story was written. It tells you somewhere what, no, does it? Oh, it does tell you when the stories were written. But that is like at the table of contents. I didn't know that. I didn't know that was there when I was reading it. That's, I thought it told us where. Oh, never mind. Anyways, it does tell you when they're written. It's just hidden on the copyright page, because I think that a good collection of short stories, if it's not all modern or, like 2020's best horror short stories, that they should tell you when the stories were written, especially if they're written, 30 plus years in the past. Because knowing the era that they come from is part of a mindset you get into so that you can enjoy the story. Or one of the things that helps you to enjoy the story. So this was fantastic. I loved every tale in here except for 2, which I really liked, except that the endings really let them down. So they were good stories up until the ending. So I didn't take a point off for that, because usually I give short story collections a 3, because I will rate each individual story as I go along, and then I just add up and divide and find the actual average. And it's always 3 point something. And it always rounds down to 3 to 3. So for me to just say skip all that, I'm giving it a 5, is a rare thing. So yeah, really, really good book. And the artists, which you've probably never heard of, or the authors, I mean, are Everett Worrell, Eli Coulter, that's a woman writing as, Mary Elizabeth Councilman, and Gray Laspina. So yeah, it's a really nice book too, just like the way it handles and the way it looks. So after that, I read a graphic novel series. This is a series of 6 books, and it is called Proof. The entire series is in these 6 books. Proof is this guy right here. His real name is John Prufrock, and people call him Proof for short, and he is a Sasquatch. So that's what this story is about. It's about cryptids, and a Sasquatch here, we'll call him Proof. He works for the Lodge, which is a association. No, what's a good word for it? A project. Let's call it a project. The Lodge is a project run jointly by the governments of the United States and Canada. Unfortunately, nothing ever happens in these books with the Canadian government, though it does with the U.S. government, which I thought was a bit of a jip for a Canadian. And I have a feeling that Alexander Grecian, who is the author of this series, is a Canadian as well. So yeah, they work for the Lodge, and they are agents. And what they do is that they go out and they work on cases. Well, what the Lodge does is that it's a habitat for cryptids, a place to keep them safe from the outside world, and also for some other cryptids, a place to keep them safe for the outside world. Like the creature we meet in the first book is the let's see, I wrote it down. I need to, Chupacabra, is that right? Chupacabra, there we are. I need to see it to say it right, the Chupacabra. And each book involves a case with a different cryptid, and let's see if I can name them. That one's just with a, I can't remember who the cryptids were in that one. This one is Gilgamesh. This one is Spring Heel Jack and something else. These are the fairies who are in reality are blue. And this one was, well, it doesn't say. So each book is a case with a different cryptid. Let me see what I wrote down here. So Prufrock and his partner Ginger Brown go out and catch the dangerous or rare cryptids. And there is also a plot running through the books of Proof looking for his real father. The team works on cases involving chupacabras, fairies, Spring Heel Jack, Gilgamesh, and Mothman, among others. So it is both a horror. There's lots of gruesome violence in here. So it's both a horror and humorous, because there's lots of fun banter between the characters and stuff. It kind of reminds me a little bit of he reminds me a little bit of the wolf from the fairy tale series. So yeah, overall I really enjoyed it, and I found it an interesting storyline for a graphic novel. It did end abruptly. It was like they were all in the middle of something and ready to go on to the next thing when we had our epilogue and the book was over. So I am thinking that the comic book itself probably got canceled quickly, and they had to come up with a ending to the current issue, and so they just stuck that on the end. I would be very surprised to find out differently. So yeah, that was that. And then the last book I read in November is The Last House on Needless Street. And this is another book. Geez, 3 of them. This is another book that drops you right into it. And I was so confused. I was going to DNF it, but I started enjoying it at a certain point and just kept on reading. So that happened to me 3 times. So this book is told through 3 narrators. A man who may or may not be a pedophile, a girl who was kidnapped by him, and a cat. Yes, you heard me, a cat. And that is one of the things that makes this extremely confusing at first, is to realize that it really is a cat. Her name is Olivia. So, as you go along reading the narratives, you start to realize something is wrong with this picture, and the truth slowly reveals itself. Overall, taking away that beginning part, I did enjoy the story, and it had a fast-paced ending, but was for the most part a slow book. And again, it didn't bother me too much because, as I said, I can read a book that has absolutely nothing happen in it if it's written by a good author, or a great author, I should say. So, where was I? Yeah, so The Last House on Needless Street is slow-paced, confusing at the beginning, but don't let that stop you, because it's well worth reading. It has a fantastic ending, and the solution to everything was just mind-boggling. I couldn't believe it when it started to come out, what was really going on. It was a real it wasn't a twist so much as it was a reveal. And it was reveal after reveal there for your really quick, tight, fast-paced ending. So a good book. I gave it 3. Like, it's a solid 3. It's got its problems, and I think a lot of people will DNF it before they get to the part where you start realizing that there's something not right that's happening here. So, yeah, that's everything that I read in November. I hope it made some sense, and that you enjoyed reading this. I hope I've introduced you to maybe a book that you would like to read, or help you make your decision about a book. But don't blame me if you read a book because I liked it and you didn't. Reader beware. So yeah, that's the end of this video, and I'm going to say goodbye now. So thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day or evening. Bye!